May the sacred presence of him who said he would abide in his teaching be our guide. May we follow his glorious example and tread with unfaltering step this noble path until we too shall attain enlightenment. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, maha prajna paramita. So once again, good evening. Nice to see all of you out there. I think of you as our kind of sangha of squares, lively bodhisattva squares. It's nice to see you. My talk this evening is about gathas. Gathas are short recitations that are said before, can be sacred activities. Oftentimes it's everyday activities that turns us back to practice, brings us back to the present moment again and again, kind of like a mindfulness bell in a certain way. They bring us back to our intention to be present, to be clear, and to bring us back into alignment with our deepest intention. So I'm going to start with a little story. So this is where we're headed this evening. I'm going to start with a little story about my first introduction to working with gathas, and give a short introduction to gathas. Then we're going to create our own. So just be keeping that in mind as you're hearing the talk. So we'll take a few minutes to create a few of our own gathas. And then I'm hoping that some of you would be willing to share what you've created. And so that is where we are headed. So when I first started practicing at Dharma Rain as a very new to Zen and new to training, I remember the old Dharma house, and I would slip past the kitchen into what they called the butler's pantry, into this little tiny bathroom, to use the bathroom back there. And there were mysterious signs in that bathroom that caused me to ponder. And one of them, if you can imagine, you're doing what one does in a bathroom, right? And you see this little sign that says, adoration to the Buddhas, adoration to the limitless teaching, peace, speak, blaze, up to the glorious peaceful one for whom there is no disaster. So that was the first one that I encountered and went, what is this place? What is this practice? And then the other one that really struck me was there would be one by the mirror. There would be this sign by the mirror that said, in parentheses before, was, I take the toothbrush that all living things may profit. May they understand the truth quickly and become naturally pure. And then after, it says after, our teeth have been cleaned so that all living things may profit. Since we control the fang of delusion, let us crush delusion as this toothbrush has been crushed in the mouth. So these little signs, as I said, kind of raise some questions for me, like, what is this place? What is this practice? What is going on? What does this mean? And I think at another level, kind of almost even unconsciously, it kind of raised this question about how do we practice and how do we have practice, our deepest intention, permeate every single aspect of our life? And thinking, because I was very new to practice, then thinking somehow these people are perhaps doing that or holding that as an aspiration and intention. But it was with a little bit of humor that I would kind of engage these verses and thinking, what is this? My next kind of deeper experience with gathas came not too long after starting practice, when what often naturally comes up as a question is, how can I deepen my practice? What can I do? We're all, many of us are kind of looking for that for that list of things that are going to help us. And, you know, there are things, right? And it was suggested to me to add gathas, add a recitation into some point of daily life, instead to some point of practice. And when I first came to practice, I really strongly resonated with the image of Kanzeon and compassion. And she was my first altar figure. In fact, she's the one that's in the Sanzen room when we had a Sanzen room. That was my very first figure. And so I, and actually, preview of coming attractions, but there's a little booklet that Dharma Rain used to put out, a little handout that had all these recitations. And to my delight, I found that, I believe it's Teiko that put them on our website. So these verses are on our website. So you can find these little gathas on the Wy'East website. So the one that I engaged with and did every time I sat, every time I went to sit zazen, was the Kanzeon offertory. And I'll just read that one for you. Wholeheartedly do I undertake this practice. I offer the merits thereof to Kanzeon, the great compassionate bodhisattva, who is my example. Whenever practice is undertaken, great compassion is with me, and I am searching for it within myself. I pray for peace in all the world. I pray that evil may be overcome by good. I pray for the peace of this place and the cessation of all disaster. And it was really a delight to prepare for this talk and be reminded, because I recited that for many years at the beginning of my practice, generating compassion for myself and for others. And it did its work. It was really worthwhile undertaking. So that just gives you a little bit of sense of my relationship with this practice. And as I said, where we're headed this evening is I'm going to talk a little bit more about like kind of the history of gathas, not a deep dive. It's really, this is more meant to be kind of you thinking about what are some points of connection I can make in my day, in my life, that are going to bring me back, and linking that to an everyday activity. Where would it benefit me to support this intention? Where am I distracted? Or it would be nice to have a kind of a, well, kind of like planting a flag. I'm gonna bring myself back here. So be thinking about that. Well, and two just kind of sidebar things. Part of the reason, part of the inspiration for the talk are kind of two things. One, I think this pandemic is kind of messing with many of our senses of time. I know for me, like I just ended my workday like literally less than 10 feet away. And so it's very odd to, and I've been reading some commentary, as I think you probably have, where we don't have the natural markers. And normally, if we were going to meet together on a Wednesday, we would have all traveled someplace. We would have all put on robes, changed out of street clothes. All these natural markers. We would set up the zendo, and then we would say goodbye. And all these natural transitions, they're just really changed in all this. And the other reason this came up for me is that, again, with this pandemic, I think it is easy to have spikes of anxiety for lots of different reasons. Spike of anxiety when I go into the grocery store and I see somebody come approach me without a mask. Spike of anxiety when somebody I love coughs. So it's easy. We're kind of all on high guard, and it's really easy. So ways to bring ourselves back to center, back to our intention, here in the present. I think it's very helpful. So let me share a little bit about, tiny bit about I'm keeping an eye on the time because I want to give you time to create these. As I said at the beginning, gathas are short verses that bring us back to the present moment, back to our practice. And it's a way to, so they're short verses, and I'll give some examples that we harmonize our thoughts, our body, and oftentimes we can harmonize it with our breath too. So two resources that I had intended to put in the chat before this is one is present moment, wonderful moment by Thich Nhat Hanh. And it is, he's got gathas for all occasions in here, for everyday things, and really, really quite lovely. And I feel like, you know, we're all, since we're reading his other book, it's nice to just have this as an adjunct. And the other one that I drew heavily from, you can see all my wild sticky notes here, is The Dragon Who Never Sleeps by Roshi Aitken, Robert Aitken. And I actually drew heavily on this one for my preparation tonight. Thanks for putting that in the chat, Joshin. So these are lovely resources. I'll share a couple just to give you some examples. Thich Nhat Hanh. There's also a really lovely, like 10-minute video from Thich Nhat Hanh introducing this. That is also worth seeing. So a couple of examples. He has one for throwing out the garbage. In the garbage, I see a rose. In the rose, I see the garbage. Everything is in transformation. Even permanence is impermanence. And then he has one about using the telephone, which I always like, which I've heard this one before and like. There's another one too on that video, on the YouTube video. Words can travel thousands of miles. May my words create mutual understanding and love. May they be as beautiful as gems, as lovely as flowers. So it's dropped everything. So I also want to share just a couple from Aitken's book, and then give you kind of his formula for how, a little bit of history in his formula about how they work. So he has also them for like all kinds of different occasions. He has a whole bunch about taking your seat in the zendo. Taking my seat in the zendo, I vow with all beings to acknowledge that here is the sacred, this bottom, this body, this breath. Another one about being sitting with others. When I sit with my friends in Zazen, I vow with all beings to touch and receive and convey the mind of rivers and stars. So you can see there's kind of a practical element, but this lovely poetic quality to some of these. Just tiny bit of history on this. So Gatha comes from the Sanskrit word meaning song or verse. I use the term pretty loosely just to mean any sort of short recitation that turns you to practice. One other fact that's kind of interesting is that they trace gathas back to 1300 BC and to some Indo-Iranian religious groups. And so they said as Buddhism came through that area, kind of picked up that practice, and then it's kind of dispersed through many of the lineages of Buddhism. So it's very, very old. So in Aitken's book, he gives this nice little formula for creating these. And both he and Thich Nhat Hanh talk about there's traditional recitation, traditional gathas that are found in monastic life. And Aitken talks about adapting these for our lay lives, for Western life, for everyday life. So that's what we're going to aim at when we create ours. So line 1 of these gathas, he says, establishes the occasion. So it is what we're doing. So now as I pick up the phone, now as I wash this dish, that kind of thing. And then line 2 is super key. So it's always the same according to his formula. I vow together with all beings. I vow together with all beings. And there's a lot that is included in that phrase, which point us to our bodhisattva vow, that we're practicing not just for all beings, but with all beings. We are included in that. We're practicing not directed outward towards others, but we are included in all of that. Because self and other are the same, we practice together with all beings. And then the third and the fourth lines is something about our conduct within that circumstance. Something about how we want to embrace that activity that we're writing this about. Something that expresses our heart mind in that moment. Something that expresses our deepest intention that we want to bring to that. Something that expresses our desire to reduce suffering for self and other. I just listed a whole bunch of stuff. Doesn't have to be all of those things, but one of those things. Something that brings forth our deepest intention. So what I'd like to do now is spend a few minutes creating your own. So think of an activity, doesn't have to be absolutely every day, but something that comes up with regularity that you do. So, and I could even put it in the chat. So like line 1 is going to be whatever that activity is. Line 2 is going to be I vow together with all beings. And then line 3 and 4 is going to be your mindset or your intention in that. I hope I've given, do you need some more, do you need any more examples to get the flavor of this, or do you think you've got it? You got it. Give me a thumbs up if you're ready, good to go. Okay. Okay. You can kind of like, you know, I'll put a few in the chat, and I'll also put the formula in the chat as we're working on it. So I'm going to give about 5 to 7 minutes to work on that. We'll see, maybe more. I'm going to check in with you at 5, okay? All right. Raise your hand if you need a little more time. We'll take just like one more minute and then we'll come back together. All right, I think we will come back together. If you have last thoughts that you want to kind of finish up while we come back, that is perfectly all right. Thanks for engaging the activity. I'm hoping that some of you might be willing to share some of your gathas. Don't feel pressured. I don't know how to unmute you all or what to do for the technology part of it. I guess you can unmute yourself. I'm looking at Joshin. So you can unmute yourself. Is there one that you'd like to share?
I'd like to share. I don't know that I did it right, but I'm pleased with having done it. As the occasion is going to bed, as I lie down and close my own eyes and open the eyes of the world, let myself step clear to be noticed. Let me have compassion even for the imagined, for all is imagined.
Thank you.
I don't know if that even fits the exercise, but
it's very open. You know, it's super open. It's like whatever would support and encourage. So it's I gave some examples, but it's a pretty loose form, and you could even hear that Thich Nhat Hanh's structure is different than what Aitken was suggesting. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anyone else that would like to share? Rowan, you can unmute yourself maybe.
First of all, thanks for giving the Dharma talk, and it really, I'm total buy-in. I use the Gathas often, but this one has really sparked me. Like, thanks for the formula, but I just wrote this one because self-explanatory. I have a tank bag on my motorcycle that has a clear to put a map in, and with GPS and everything, you don't use maps anymore. It's just it's all digital, but I can write this, and I'm going to put it on the top underneath the clear plastic. But it says, starting this motorcycle, I vow together with all beings to be fully present in each moment, letting go of the idea of a destination. So, but thanks for doing that. I'm going to have that there, and it's very helpful.
I can picture you mindfully riding away to the mountains on your motorcycle.
It's important to stay present when you're doing that, and it's a good reminder. Yeah. Stoked about it.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Anybody else like to share?
I have one. Oh, go ahead, Penny.
Okay, I just have, when I'm hiking on a trail, I vow together with all beings to pay attention to the beauty around me, to the trees, wildflowers, smells, breeze, and mountains, and splendor.
That's it. Thanks, Penny. The kind of side benefit of sharing it kind of gives a little glimpse into our lives and some of our daily activities, and I find that really connecting and lovely. Teiko, would you like to share yours?
Yes, this will go in my barn. Now as I saddle this horse, I vow together with all beings to ride with patience and generosity and understanding and without violence, so we move together with grace.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else like to share theirs? Don't feel pressured. But
I'll share one of mine. I think I scribbled down several. Putting on my robes, I vow with all beings to serve with open hands and a patient heart.
Thanks, Josie. Trish, did you have your hand up? Oh, you need to unmute yourself.
I do. Okay. When I or someone else gets stressed, I vow together with all beings to trust there is a purpose and to be calm and remember how beautiful and peaceful the stars are in the night sky.
Thank you. Kemya.
Donning my beekeeper suit, I vow together with all beings to welcome the hum of the hive into the breath of my soul.
Anyone else? I'll share mine. I wrote one. Oh, did someone raise their hand that I missed? Jorin?
I just had two questions. The last, these are great, but the last line of Geotians, was it what type of heart?
Oh Lordy, I have to look at it again. Patient.
Patient. And Trish, if you wouldn't mind, could you say yours again? That was beautiful. I just real quick about the anxiety.
It's nice to hear these a couple times, isn't it?
I know, I want to write it down.
Actually, I had the word anxious, but I decided to use stressed. When I or someone else gets stressed, I vow together with all beings to trust there is a purpose and to be calm and remember how beautiful and peaceful the stars are in the night sky.
Thank you.
That's where I get my calm, when you can see the sky. You're welcome.
Anyone else want to share theirs? It's funny to be looking around the cyber room. I'll share the one I created. Now, as I start my work day, I vow together with all living beings to bring my full attention and heart to the work that I do. Well, so
Can I add one thing?
yeah.
I'm looking forward to making more of these as I start chaplaincy. Some of the chaplains I've spoken with have mentioned that oftentimes right before they go into a patient's room, they'll say a short prayer or a small mantra or just something to bring themselves present and attentive to the person they're about to provide care for. So this is something that's quite useful in a healthcare setting.
I just have a couple closing comments, and then we have just a couple minutes for general conversation and comments and questions. Partly I often make talks that I kind of need to hear. And I notice that I am really guilty of not quite wrapping up something before I kind of leap into something else. And then and especially working from home, I notice I'm like, well, maybe I'll have lunch. Oh, wait, there's an email. I'll go do that email. And then I, slide back and forth. So I'm having definite beginnings and ends to things. It helps me bring my complete full attention. And also the verse that came to mind this afternoon for me was, I think this is Dogen, to live by Zen is the same as to live an ordinary daily life. So sometimes we kind of have these thoughts that, we could really practice deeply and it would be different if we were somehow somewhere else or somehow our circumstance was different. And I think this practice, this really simple practice of Gathas shows us that, our lives are sacred and important and complete. Our venue of practice is complete as it is right here, right now. And this is just one way to support that and to remember that. So that is, that's all I had to offer. But if there's any, we have just a couple minutes for any questions or comments about any of this. Dixie.
I had a question when you said our deepest intention. Did you mean a fixed deepest intention or the deepest intention of that activity or something else entirely?
Well, that's a good question, kind of to investigate. What is my deep intention in this circumstance? What is my truest, deepest intention in this circumstance? I hope that helps. It's kind of an answer that's a non-answer. But turning it back towards and it's a good question to investigate. What am I wanting to bring forward in this moment? Anybody else have any comments or thoughts? Trish?
Oh, good. I just wanted to quickly say, I think listening to everybody's Gatha is kind of uplifting.
I agree. Yeah, it really was. Go on.
I just wanted to say I was reading something and it said Gathas is the Buddhist yellow stickies. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's totally true. When you really want to focus on something or remember something, you write it on a sticky and stick it up on the wall. So
that's a great image.
Mm-hmm.
Well, any final thoughts or comments before I say the closing verse?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. So I guess I will close. Please make a show. Abiding in this ephemeral world, like a lotus in muddy water, the mind is pure and goes beyond. Thus we bow to Buddha. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, maha, prajna, paramita. All right. You were also still, I thought you were frozen for a moment. So please feel free to unmute yourselves and to say goodnight. And thanks again for being here this evening and supporting each other in practice. How nice.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night,
Thanks for the day.
Everybody, thank you,
Good
Shintai.
night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Oh, good
you.
afternoon.
Okay, where is she? Oh, I see. Over there.
Good.